Let's talk tomatoes. This AeroGarden has a form of what's called a micro-dwarf tomato. The reason they call it a micro-dwarf is because it normally does not get beyond about 12 inches in height. It takes about 90 to 100 days to mature. This particular variety is from AeroGarden and it's called the Golden Harvest. There's two plants in this AeroGarden. The advantage of the micro-dwarf is you can grow multiples in small spaces, have a very nice harvest. They do continue to produce tomatoes over a period of time. So if you're looking for something for the kitchen where you can grab a handful of tomatoes, this would probably be a great idea for you. It doesn't take up a whole lot of space. You can even bunch multiple plants into a large container out on your deck, and you don't have to worry about the standard height of 8 to 10 feet on some of the old heirloom tomatoes. In regards to the flavor, this has typical cherry flavor. It is a slight acidic, light fruit, juicy, well-balanced tomato. To the right of it are clone cuttings, and today let's take a quick look at the dwarf tomato plant as well as the clone cuttings and how to reproduce one plant into several. If you're curious, you can see that there are several tomatoes on the plant already. These turn to this beautiful dark yellow gold color when they're completely ripe. The plant does tend to produce tomatoes all over. You'll see on the top of the plant there are a lot of flowers. There's more clusters of tomatoes. The two plants that I have here seem like they are doing quite well. The number of days that they have been grown from seed is currently 92. Now, if we wanted to replicate this plant, what we could do is take a look for a terminal leader. Now, on a standard tomato plant, it would be where the plant is growing upwards and it has perhaps a sucker where one of the branches come out. And I know those terms may not be familiar to everyone, but if you look at this particular section of the plant, you'll notice that there's a cluster of tomatoes, there's flowers, and there's growth. So what I'm going to do is, to start out with, I'm going to try not to knock off any of these tomatoes. I want to find out if this truss of tomatoes is attached. It looks like all those are coming off another stem that's coming up out of the plant. So the stem that I will probably use will be this one. This particular stem has several things going for it. It comes off of the plant, there we go, has a nice thick stem that comes up and actually branches. In addition to this branching, you can see that it goes off in two different directions. You have what's called a sucker, and that is that small area of growth in the crotch of the limbs. That is a very good area to grab if you're doing a clone cutting, otherwise known as a cut and root. The flowers that are on the plant, I will probably take those off. Let's go ahead, snip that off, and I will show you how I usually set those up to root for producing secondary plants. The nice thing about that would be that the clone cuttings have the same age as the mother plant. Doesn't mean that it will instantly produce, but it does mean that you can cut the production days down from, say, for example, 90 to perhaps 45, because it accelerates the maturity of the plant. For the cut, you'd like to have a sharp, clean blade. I just use this penknife. What I'm going to do now is come in down at the base. Like I said, I'm going to try not to knock any of these green tomatoes off. Right where this attaches, just gently slicing through so I don't cut any of the other stems. There you have it. So to start out with, what I'd like is to remove the lower leaf branches off, because this is the part of the cutting that I'd like to have the roots come off. So I'll come in, remove that. This can go also. It doesn't bother me to pull off a little bit of the protective outer layer because that just increases the odds of having these cuttings root. So those are cleaned off. Next thing I would like to do is take off the flowers. It would be nice for this plant to flower and fruit, but it's going to be just a little too soon to ask that because you do want the plant to establish some substantial roots and growth first. Here's the sucker I was talking about. Here's another little growth that is coming up. I won't need these huge leaves for the clone, so I'm going to come in and remove part of that leaf structure, and that's what's left. At the base, this is where the roots would form. I'm going to put a slice down the stem part way. That doesn't look too bad. Let's go ahead and open that up a little bit. I'll slip the blade back in and pry so you can see. There you go. That just increases the surface area for the root formation on the clone. You really don't need to do that, and if you're not talented with a knife, you know, it's easy to come back on yourself. So you could always put this on a cutting board, and then you could probably get a more exact slice going. What I'm going to do next is grab one of these neoprene clone collars. You can get them on Amazon. They actually squeeze into a 2-inch net pot and snap tight. Gives you the ability to transfer into other hydroponic containers. But I'm leaving my options open for what I want to do with these plants. If I want to grow them in the AeroGarden, if I want to grow them into a non-circulating hydroponic container or deep water culture. So for right now, there's a split on one side. I'm going to open that up. I'm going to put the cutting in the middle and close that back up. That's about how much stem is underneath. That's what's on the top. These growth areas are all looking like they should take off and do well. What I'm going to end up doing is dropping this into a second AeroGarden. Hopefully what we'll see is roots forming. Plants, if they all get rooted, I should be able to keep a succession of tomato plants growing from this one mother plant. Have a continuous supply of tomatoes. One more quick tip is mason jars can easily be used to start your tomatoes or even grow them to completion if you were to keep these topped off with like half-strength nutrient solution from Hydroponics. This particular cutting is off that same tomato plant. It's in a half-gallon mason jar. It has leggings that have been sliced to slide over to keep the algae out. The top of the mason jar has been replaced with urban hydroculture jar lid, as well as an urban hydroculture split ring that I could easily take off. Hopefully this will be able to show you the difference between circulating hydroponics in an AeroGarden or non-circulating hydroponics in a jar in terms of which one is best or perhaps best for you.